Okay, I think the penultimate session here. How's everybody feeling? Energy level good? Excited? Excited for this session about daily deals? Who's excited for this session? Let me see a show of hands. All right, okay. So we've got a relatively compressed time, as all these panels have, to get through a lot of material, to answer questions, to really get to the heart of what's going on with this daily deal space. A year ago, this was the hottest topic in local, and now it's not quite as hot. How many people think that daily deals are dead? Show of hands. One? Only one? How many people think daily deals are on life support? Okay, more people. So, all right, so I would like each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their companies, not too much, and then we'll get into discussion, and I'll try and integrate your questions during the discussion. So if you have questions and you want to raise your hand, feel free to do that. I'm Greg Sterling. I'm an analyst, blogger, et cetera, and that's all I'll say about myself. Sarah, why don't you go first?
Sure. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? Yes? My name is Sarah Chubb. I have been at Gilt City as the president and general manager for 5 months. Prior to that, I spent 20 years at Condé Nast, the last 15 of those building their digital division, and happy to be here.
Hi, my name is Sumir Meghani, and I run the West Coast team at Groupon. I've been at the company for about 2.5 years. I think everyone in the audience is familiar with Groupon. We've been around 4 years. We are a local commerce company operating in 48 countries with about 200 million subscribers.
My name is David Payne. I started and run a website based out of Atlanta called Scoutmob, and we started about 3 years ago as kind of a mobile deals offering platform. So think of what Groupon was doing with Groupon Now, Living Social Instant. We were one of the first kind of doing that. Since then, we've evolved into kind of a local media property with content, e-commerce offering, a lot of things like that.
Okay, great. And remember, you can ask questions at any time, so be ready. So you've heard this audience, while they don't think the daily deals are dead, they certainly think that they're on life support. Agree or disagree, and why?
I disagree strongly, and I understand why you guys probably think that. And I should have started with saying Gilt City has been around for about 2 years. We are a sibling company, separate division of the Gilt Group, which really pioneered the flash sale idea here in the States. I would say the last 9 months, which is the time period that Greg was talking about, have actually been incredibly good for us. We've seen double-digit growth throughout the last 9 months. Hurricane Sandy aside, we're particularly strong in New York, but we're in 7 core markets and another 5 markets after that where we have people servicing them from outside the market on the sales side. We've also seen a pretty dramatic increase in repeat business with our vendors and in engagement with our users. I actually just want to share with you, for those of you who do think that that's what's happening with the daily deal space, a recent street fight story actually quoted Rice University saying that 75% of merchants today that are using daily deals say that they're profitable. Our numbers are a little north of that. They're closer to about 85%, and we're working on getting that to as close to 100 as we can. And what the Rice University story said as well was that 80% of the customers they saw coming in the door were new customers, which is what most of them are looking for, and we're actually a little bit north of that. And then the last piece that was also in that street fight piece said that the actual number of people using daily deals is increasing at a really healthy clip, which we're seeing as well in our customer acquisition and our conversion. And that actually one of the things that's happening for us that's really significant, because I think we're going to get around to talking about the business model, is that our average order value has been steadily climbing over the last 10 to 12 months, and that's key. Spending the same amount on overhead, but watching the AOV rise.
Okay, somebody else, jump in. On life support, why or not?
I would challenge the question a little bit, because I think, at least for Groupon, daily deals are one piece of a large sort of collection of things that we're trying to do. We're trying to build a local commerce sort of platform for small businesses, trying to be relevant in a lot of ways other than just new customer acquisition, which is how we started. And so I think I think just by solely focusing on the deal element, I think you're sort of missing the bigger picture. But I agree with Sarah. I think even when you look at the daily deal sort of data from the last year at Groupon and what we publicly released since Q3, which was the last time we talked about a lot of the numbers, we're seeing a lot of healthy trends. So our business is really simple. Are we taking care of consumers who come to our site every day, and are we taking care of merchants who work with us? And if we're doing those two things well, I think it speaks well for our prospects, but also the industry. So at the end of Q3, we had about 40 million active customers globally. That was almost a 40% increase year over year. And so we're seeing an increase in the number of people who are actively transacting on the Groupon site. Our customer satisfaction score measured by an external third party is 86. It's higher than Google, it's higher than Apple, higher than Nordstrom. And so we're very confident that we're delivering great value to consumers, and they're responding by transacting a lot more throughout our website and our mobile platform. On the merchant side, in Q3, it was our third straight quarter featuring 100,000 unique merchants globally, and more than half of those were repeat merchants. So merchants, we're both acquiring new merchants, and merchants are wanting to come back over and over again. And so when you look at those trends together, we feel really good about the business. We feel really good about the daily deal business, and also the other tools that Groupon's developing to continue to add value to merchants and consumers alike.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is if you rephrase the question and said, are there measurable ways to drive merchants into businesses, and is that going away? And absolutely not. We're in the first inning of that. So it won't be called daily deals for very long, but that fundamental tenet is not going away.
Okay, so consumer attitudes toward daily deals. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal feedback from the market that consumers have burned out on daily deals, or they're just tired of irrelevant deals. And we could have lots of humorous examples: microdermabrasion, bikini wax, and so on and so forth, Brazilian blowouts, and all of these kinds of things that consumers seem to be getting that don't seem to be entirely relevant. Relevance is a question that I hear again and again and again. So where do we stand with that? Are things improving with relevance? Is the consumer burnout perception just wrong? Where on the consumer side do you see the evolution of this market going in terms of those considerations?
One of you guys want to start?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we've tried to do the last year is what I phrase as sort of being globally hyper-local. Being in 48 countries, having 200 million subscribers enables us to collect a lot of data around people's preferences, what they like to see, whether it's the categories that Greg talked about, or even new categories that we're not in.
LASIK surgery, for example. I could keep going. Botox, teeth whitening. Keep going. We
have a couple years ago we released a targeting algorithm called Smart Deals, which has given us like a 25% lift in North America on our email purchase rates. And what we found is exactly what Greg said. When you give consumers relevant deals that are located near them, consumers will respond by pulling out their credit card. And so we've had a lot of success as we've expanded the categories that we're playing in, as we've expanded the geographies that we're playing in globally. How do we still become relevant to a consumer by giving them a deal that's both local and relevant to their tastes and their interests? And to me, and I think Sarah can speak to this as well, being able to make the deals relevant for the audience is a single best way to avoid any perception of fatigue. And certainly we've seen great success because of our scale and being globally hyper-local. We've seen great success with that.
I wonder if you, Sarah, I know you're going to talk, and David, maybe talk about relevance. What is relevance in this context also in your remarks? I mean, because that's a word we all think we understand, but maybe we don't.
There are a couple of ways of going after relevance, right? So I think probably all of us are doing different kinds of things in personalization, and we all expect that will increase. Geolocation and geofencing become sort of an aspect to the overall personalization sort of approach to things. We're fortunate at Gilt City in the sense that we're very focused on primarily a female, relatively young customer, and so because of our Gilt heritage too, it's high end. So that puts some guardrails around the types of things that we sell to begin with, and you add personalization into that, you're likely to do a little bit better with relevance, but we're constantly tweaking that. We also, I really believe that there is fatigue. I think that there's fatigue particularly at the more mass end of things, and we call it voucher regret, right? So I bought 3 or 4 vouchers, I was so excited, and I'm busy, and they're in the drawer, and now there's another great offer, and I let those expire. Do I really want to buy this one? And we do a lot of things around customer service to try to encourage people. We try to encourage them to try again. We encourage our vendors to go past the expiration date, because we think that actually is relatively real. But we think that some of the other things that you might attribute to burnout, beyond sort of the whether it was relevant or not, which we think we're actually doing a pretty decent job of, are primarily executional. And we spend a huge amount of time with our vendors really trying to impress upon them that these are your best prospects. These are not people who, you should not look at them as people who just are cheap. And I think because the daily deal space got so crowded so quickly, and so many people thought of it first as, oh my God, that's a great deal on X, that many of the merchants who participate in these treated the people who came in the door as if they were schnorrers, to use a Yiddish term a coworker of mine uses all the time. Ugh, it's that person who got the discount. Our people are very high end, and actually one of the things that we talk to our vendors about is they're huge sharers, because they're young women. They use Instagram, they use Facebook, they use Twitter. Close to 95% of our users actually talk about their Gilt City experience with someone else, and it better be good. And if the whole reason you wanted to market to that person to begin with was that she's an influential in her sphere, you better treat her better than the person who came in and didn't know that you were making this special offer. So we're trying to work both ends, the technology end, but also sort of the hand-holding side of it, to get rid of some of the executional issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as personalization goes, I think Gilt City has some natural guardrails because of their demographic. Scoutmob does because we're extremely sort of local. We're inside of like hubs of cities, how we kind of think of ourselves. So we have kind of a natural geographic. I think when you get to the scale that you guys are at, there's different personalization problems that I think are particularly challenging that we haven't kind of faced. But I mean, relevancy is a challenge, and I think we do it because of our brand and our business models. But any secret sauce around relevancy we haven't found other than demographic.
So Sarah raised a couple of issues that I think are very interesting and I want to explore, and I also want to segue into the merchant side of the discussion. But first, I want to talk about the expiration problem. So I think what happened to a lot of people is that they just bought deal after deal after deal. I know I bought a lot of photo to canvas print deals. I still have 3 that I haven't used. And the first time somebody misses an expiration, right? So they bought a lot of deals, they fulfilled, but then they lose a deal, or it expires. And some of them may try and get the value of that deal from the merchant and may have a negative experience. You know, we'll give you the face value, but we'll give you the value of your purchase, but not the value of the deal. That problem, I think, has triggered some of the frustration on the consumer side. That's one issue. The second issue is this question about customer service and treating the consumer right. I mean, there's always this sense that some of these merchants resented the deal buyers, that there was a certain amount of ambivalence / resentment. So could you speak to one or both of those issues, maybe Sumir, about the expiration problem and then the merchant attitude?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question, and certainly we've done a lot of the things that Sarah described as just best in breed customer service policies. We have a great customer service team, and we have a customer service policy called the Groupon Promise, where we'll work very hard on behalf of consumers to find a resolution to any issues that they have. I'll go back to our customer satisfaction score being at 86, which is higher than a lot of best-in-breed customer service companies that are even operating offline. Breakage is an industry definition for someone buying a voucher, a daily deal voucher, not using it. We certainly send email reminders to our users when a deal's about to expire. And like Sarah said, we'll encourage merchants to do the right thing for customers coming in the door, because the real value comes not just on the first transaction, but the repeat purchases and treating that customer well and helping that business acquire that customer for life by providing them with great service. Related to that, one of the ways that we've tried to help facilitate a longer engagement between customers and merchants is through tools like Groupon Scheduler. One of the challenges that we had early on when delivering volume to merchants, particularly in some of the categories that Greg seems to frequent, is in the health and beauty sector, for example, you'd have hundreds of people lined up to go make an appointment for a haircut or for a massage. And especially if you're a small business who has no way of scheduling maybe beyond a book at the front desk, it's very easy to get frustrated with all these people calling you wanting to make bookings. So we built a tool called Groupon Scheduler where people can just book their appointment online. That tool has helped both consumer satisfaction and merchant satisfaction, in a lot of cases. Our sales reps and our marketing team has done things to help restaurants with things like tip stickers, encouraging consumers to tip on the full value of the meal, not just the discounted amount, which a lot of consumers, this is a relatively new industry. A lot of customers just weren't sure what it means to be a good customer when using one of these vouchers. So I think collectively, probably everyone on this panel, we've all made strides because we know that merchant satisfaction is critical to the survival of the space. And I think our data, both on the merchant and consumer satisfaction side, suggests that we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, just real quick about that, about those two issues. Scoutmob was kind of founded on the idea that there's the deals are kind of persistent and consumers don't buy them up front. So right now, if you were to download it, there are 250 kind of deals persistent in New York that you don't pay for and you use and check in, and the merchant pays us, kind of like they pay OpenTable, kind of a flat fee. So we were kind of designed on the idea of that expiration date and that guilt kind of not, or regret kind of not being there. But I'll tell you, the discount from the consumer is a real issue. Like I think everyone, probably everyone in this room maybe thinks that, they may not believe in 50% off, but it worked, and some kind of incentive to consumers is necessary. But historically, your favorite neighborhood pizzeria thinks that giving a discount means they're hurting or means there's something kind of wrong. And so there's a real balance here that like this industry is going to have to reconcile between that's what drives people in. You want 5 new customers a day, you want 10, that's what happens. So that's what you need to do. And so educating and the amount of labor needed to educate merchants on that is a real problem.
There are some other things you can do, and it's much, much harder at the more mass end. So restaurants, I very early in my sales career in media, I called on local restaurants, and a friend of mine who had a restaurant said, "Oh my God, that would mean I was almost out of business advertising in your magazine." And so they've come a long way, but we actually focus on the experience itself. And again, it's easier probably for us because we operate at the higher end, but we can offer at a really nice restaurant. If you take San Francisco, which is a massively foodie town, people care a lot about food and restaurants in San Francisco.
And New York, of course, people care.
And New York, although San Francisco, I think, beats New York in that respect. But so we've done some really, really special restaurants that don't really need the business in any, in sort of the way that you're talking about. But let's say they're opening a new room and they're expanding their capacity, or they've just started a brunch or whatever. We do pretty expensive packages that include things like, the chef will come out and talk to you about the wine pairing. You get to go home with an apron that's signed by the celebrity chef. You get a little present when you leave, and there's always some sort of price, because we all show prices and we show the slashed price. There's always some sort of price help, but it doesn't really, at the high end anyway, it doesn't have to be anywhere close to 50% if you've bundled it in with things that people feel are very special. And those very often, and I know we're going to talk about business model, we may take a smaller margin on something like that to really get the marquee brand onto the site, because to us it's also programming. And I know you guys experience the same thing. We are constantly trying to keep two sets of consumers happy, or two sets of customers rather. The consumer who wants to be surprised and see something special, and the vendor who wants business to walk in the door. And we look at the assortment of things that are on the email in our 7 core markets and our extended ones 4 times a week. Is that mix the kind of thing that makes me think, even if I don't buy anything today, boy, I'm opening it next time because there's always something cool. And so that Again, a little easier for us because of where we operate, but incredibly important. For us, if it were just about the discount, it probably wouldn't be a business.
Okay, we're going to go to questions in a minute, but I want to ask, what are you doing today on the merchant side? And we've heard a little tiny bit about this. What are you doing today on the merchant side to ensure their success versus what you may have been doing in the past? Because this is one of the big criticisms on the merchant side, and that you hear, that these merchants don't really know what they're doing, and they don't know how to accommodate the crowds, and they didn't anticipate the volume, and they lose money. And even though now the Rice study indicated that more of these deals are profitable, a majority of them, there's still some naivete or uncertainty or inexperience. But just talk today about what you do to prepare these merchants and versus what you did before. What's different now?
I think most of the merchants, all the small merchants we engage with on a regular basis, they're passionate entrepreneurs who are, they're great restaurateurs or they're great spa operators. And I think as we tried to solve the customer acquisition problem for these businesses, we realized that there were ancillary sort of problems that they hadn't solved when starting their business and running their business because they weren't experts at yield management or scheduling. And so I talked a little bit about this earlier, but in order to build sort of this local commerce operating system that's our vision as a company, we started to build out those tools to make the customer acquisition process for the daily deal easier, but also just to create value for them in other ways. So an example is Groupon Scheduler, where a consumer can schedule a deal online in certain appointment slots. We also acquired a few companies over the last year to help us, particularly in the food and drink sector. One is a company called Crumb, actually right here out of New York, and they built a really awesome point-of-sale system that can run on an iPad because how cool would it be if you could buy a Groupon and then go straight to a restaurant, and then the restaurant would know your preferences, if you're vegetarian, if you're kosher, if you don't eat eggs, and so integrating Breadcrumb into the other tools and services that Groupon has is definitely a step in the direction that we're headed in. And then lastly, payments. It turns out that a lot of small businesses pay exorbitant fees just to process credit card transactions, and we hadn't discovered this until we just started talking to small businesses every day. So we have Groupon Payments, which is our own payment processing platform that's very competitive, works very well for small businesses, particularly those with the transaction size of $15 or more. So those are tools we've built. We've also done a better job. We have a whole merchant services organization now within Groupon that's separate from the sales team. Their only job is to prep merchants for a feature, make sure they get a redemption device so that they can scan Groupons that come in, mitigate fraud. And so we put a lot of thought into that because, as everyone has agreed, no one really knew what would happen when the space started. And as it's evolved, we've really had to respond to merchant satisfaction, and I think we've done a good job with that.
Anybody else want to add anything to that about preparing merchants differently today versus before?
Just something real quick. We're a much smaller company than Gilt and Groupon, and we kind of made a decision a year ago to think about ourselves either as a media property or kind of a service provider, go deeper into payments and ordering and kind of things like that. And we chose kind of the media property, so we've done a lot less kind of breadcrumb-like stuff. But we've certainly, economics have gotten better, deal terms have gotten better. We've always had a fairly strong brand, which seems to resonate more and more as merchants get more clever. So those are kind of the way we thought about it.
Do you have anything you want to add, Sarah?
I guess the only thing I would add is that I love it that Groupon is building all of these tools because you're helping train the vendors how to use things like this. There are also a ton of other players, particularly in point of sale and payments. So, you guys have probably been reading about them as well. The banks are now getting very involved with your points being loaded onto your card with now offers overlaid on top of it. There's a huge amount of activity. So we also have chosen not to invest necessarily in the technology POS side, and in fact are spending a fair amount of time, because we do this very high-touch relationship with our vendors, spending a lot of time with them, helping them understand what's happening. And we have mobile redemption and a lot of the sort of baseline stuff, but we're not investing in big technology at this point.
Okay, any questions in the audience? This is your chance. Am I seeing no hands? Okay, go ahead. Wait, here's a mic coming to you.
So we talked about, Dave, you talked about the 50%. Your model is different, but Sumir, you guys have recently, I guess in your beta model, in certain markets you have the marketplace, Chicago, Washington, D.C., but where people can search, and these are more persistent deals that are going to live longer. So what's the play there? How do you see it panning out? And are they, do you think the discounts will be lower, they'll live longer? And David, I'd just like to also hear from you.
I mean, I want to be clear what I mean about the 50%. I'm not the only guy in this room to be defending, I won't be that guy that defends the 50%. That's going away. But I think the pendulum's kind of swung in the other direction to where things are very merchant friendly. So your close rates for your small businesses are 70, 80%, but it doesn't really work. Like, you don't drive in enough that makes the merchant happy. And so there's going to have to be something, and my gut tells me it's something around the big bang that we're really good at, combined with loyalty and maybe some data around payments and kind of what that customer did. But it's I just think it's a real challenge. And we, just like you guys, I mean, we have a feet on the street sales infrastructure that their close rate has not moved at all in 3 years. And so these merchants like it because they're new customers walking through the door.
Yeah, so I think in the last 18 months, there's been a shift in terms of the consumer interest, in terms of the channel of preference in looking for deals like the ones that all of our companies offer. Groupon, of course, started out purely with email, and we have 200 million subscribers. Email is still a really relevant part of our business, but for example, mobile has taken off, and more transactions are happening on the phone. I know certainly that's really important for Scoutmob. But you mentioned our local marketplace, or the pull marketplace, and that's turned out to be kind of this sort of third component that's gotten a lot of traction. As of the end of Q3, I think we had something like 27,000 deals kind of active on the site. And how that ties into discount is maybe a merchant who wants that big bang, who wants to get thousands of vouchers sold, a lot of customers coming in, is very willing to offer an aggressive discount, but maybe for something more persistent that's living on the site for a longer period of time, the discount needs to be a little bit less aggressive. And we've come up with a model, in exchange for giving consumers access to a wider variety of deals, going back to Greg's question about personalization. In exchange for giving consumers that value, we're also asking them to accept a much lower discount because maybe the value proposition isn't as great to the merchant. And so that's something we're definitely excited about. And going to discounts, we're testing lower discounts on a regular basis. For example, in San Francisco, a few months ago, we ran the San Francisco Zoo at 40% off, and the deal still sold out. And so I think one of the things that we've learned as a company over the last couple of years, and I think Sarah made a great point about this, is for great brands, they're offering compelling value, maybe even something that's very unique that they don't offer every day. The discount isn't as important as it once was relative to offering consumers something very unique that they can't get anywhere else. So I think between email, mobile, and our deal marketplace, we now have 3 different channels to give merchants different control over the breadth of consumers that they want to reach in one shot.
I have a quick follow-up question on that. So push versus pull is quite different in terms of consumer intent, and I would assume the necessary incentive to get consumers to close. Have you seen that? In other words, it takes less of a discount in a pull scenario, a search scenario, to get people to convert. And have you seen on a comparable basis higher lift versus the push email scenario?
I'd say it's early. It's very early. Pull and our deal marketplace are still in infancy, so I don't think we have a lot of data yet, but we're certainly very optimistic about the value proposition with that model.
Okay, question here in the center. Wait for the mic.
Hi, my name is Sam Newmark. I'm a student and recently concluded a 5-month research project on the daily deal space. And one of the things I found was that there's a major lack of transparency among businesses in terms of knowing whether or not they should be offering a deal. So among the businesses that were least successful offering daily deals, either they shouldn't have been offering it to begin with, or they were just unable to structure the optimal deal. So my question for really any of you is, how do you educate your salespeople as to who are the best businesses to go after? And among those businesses, how do you craft the optimal deal? And on top of that, ensure that these salespeople are transparent and honest about it with the businesses when at the end of the day, they're trying to make a sale?
So if you're trying to be in a long-term relationship with a vendor, which it's much harder if you've got hundreds of thousands of vendors. It's still hard if you have thousands of vendors, which we do. But if you're trying to be in a long-term relationship, which is the way we train our salespeople, is that your job is to develop this long-term relationship. We're a marketing platform. Then you need to spend time making sure that they understand how a deal for their category could and should work. What kind of historical data do we have? We have a strategy and planning team that actually sits behind the wall, if you will, and works with the sales team to make the offer. And when I first started there, I came from media sales, and our salespeople are called curators. And I was like, well, that's a cute name, but you're salespeople. And in fact, they're not. I know. I'm nice. We actually have more demand than we have real estate for, because there are only a certain number of deals that are featured in the push, and the email. Our email open rate is fantastic. We're not walking away from email anytime soon, even though we're really working on what the next thing is. So the planning team works with the salesperson and often meets with the vendor as well to try to craft the deal. And it's done based on everything that we know so far about who our consumer is, what that market is, and what's moved in the past. And when I first started there, because I came from media, not from this sort of hybrid of branding and direct, it was completely fascinating to me to look at how the performance worked. And we actually had stats on which of the salespeople really took advantage of the strategy team, and the huge, dramatic differences in success rates. There are ways of automating this, which I think Groupon does, but for us, it's actually very high touch.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to do it that doesn't involve high touch, and I think that's why all three of our companies have had success in different ways. Our sales organization employs a very consultative approach, and the way, at least with my team that's talking to merchants every day, we approach the value proposition for merchants. We say, look at four things, right? There's the marketing value of running a Groupon, the people you're going to reach over email and on the website. Normally, businesses would have to pay money up front to get a billboard up, or to have coupons distributed through the mail. So there's sort of that media value. Then there's the value of that initial transaction and any upsell. So you go to a restaurant and maybe you order a nice glass of wine and you spend above the voucher amount. The third piece is repeat business. We're well aware that not 100% of people are not going to come back within a month or 2 months or 3 months, but there is going to be some repeat business, and our sales team will work with the vendor to give them some examples of other businesses and some statistics that can help them understand what % of consumers are likely to come back. And then the fourth piece is referrals. And our numbers, we have numbers very similar to Sarah in terms of just people talking about their experiences visiting a Groupon merchant on Twitter, on Facebook, in person. And so not only are you acquiring new customers through these types of platforms, but you're also acquiring the friends and family members of people who have a very positive experience. And so when our sales reps talk to a business and go through kind of the value proposition with the four areas that I mentioned, we come up with an offer that makes sense for the merchant, so that they're seeing value, at least with 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of those areas. And that also makes sense for our consumers, because that's the other constituent that we have to serve, and we have to make sure that there's an offer and a proposition that's very compelling for them, so that these customers can go to the business and come back and tell their friends and so on. But we're very thoughtful about that, because as Sarah said, it's a long-term relationship we're building. And like I said early on, we have 100,000, in Q3 we had 100,000 unique merchants run. More than half of them were repeat merchants. So we think we're doing a good job there.
I have 6 minutes, according to my clock.
I will just let me add one more thing. I think one of the most long-lasting things that's going to come out of this industry is that this form of advertising is largely free. We focus on a lot of restaurants, so I don't know the economics of some other verticals, but if you were talking to one of those restaurants that you surveyed, they can either pay $1,000 to Village Voice for a banner ad, a print ad, and not have a lot of results, or when you kind of do the math, it turns out to kind of cover their variable costs.
But Dave, do people understand it in that way? And my sense is that merchants don't look at it that way.
Yeah, so I would say, and this is one guy's guess, about a quarter of restaurants, neighborhood restaurants, about a quarter of the merchants think about the world that way. That doesn't mean we close more than that, but you're right, it's tough, these types of merchants, to do that kind of ROI. But if I was giving advice to some of the folks you surveyed, that's how I would box Scoutmob in and Groupon in. This has to be free to me.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, here, over on this side.
I'm just curious what kind of experiments you guys may have done in terms of incenting the consumer with bounce back offers, or to get repeat, or offers to share, in this referral sort of value you're talking about.
Well, I'll just say, with Living Social, and this is probably true of others, if you share it and 3 others buy it, you get it free. So that's one example. But go ahead. Consumer incentives for repeats or sharing. We're under 5 minutes now, so.
Sure, I'm going to talk really fast. We built the Gilt customer base initially through referrals and friends. Initially, it was closed, and you had to be invited. And that is not the case anymore at the stores division, and it's not the case at Gilt City. But what we do is if you refer to enough friends, and I'm sorry because I don't remember the name now, but I think it's if 3 of them actually go through, you get an account credit. And we use account credits for everything, for referrals, for customer service, for all sorts of things, because there's so many ways you could spend it, whether it's on Gilt City or on Gilt in the stores. It makes people pretty happy, and it brings them in and activates them as customers.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay. All right, so if there's one final question, okay, go ahead.
Hey, Greg. Just a quick comment, if you would, on what the opportunity for you guys around, licensing or pushing your content into other people's platforms. So, for example, Scoutmob, with your recent partnership with the Field Trip app, from Google, or taking Groupon deals and putting them into Foursquare, things like that. What's the opportunity look like around?
Yeah, good question. Deal syndication, deals as ad network.
Yeah, it's particularly easy for us because there's no payment involved. So we have no biz dev people, and a lot of folks have kind of approached us. Foursquare, Food Spotting, we just did Google's Field Trip app. It's been good for us, but that ad unit is very unique. So it wasn't a game changer, but it was interesting. But we were very peculiar in our ease to be able to do those kinds of deals.
Yeah, we have an API that developers take advantage of. Of course, the transaction still has to live on Groupon because that's where the customer information is and that's where the transaction has to happen. But pretty much every element of a deal page on Groupon can be syndicated through our API, and both web and mobile developers take advantage of that every day.
So we have 2 minutes left, and there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, a lot of stuff we could talk about, though we have covered a lot of ground. What's the one thing you didn't get to say, or that if you were in the audience looking back at you, you would have asked you, but I didn't, and they didn't? Final comment.
I mean, my final comment would be, if I was in the audience, I'd be wondering kind of where this is all going. And I think that for the next 12 months, the Constant Contacts of the world, the Yext of the world are going to make incremental changes. And if we all ran companies that size, we'd make incremental changes too. I think that the real disruptive thing is going to have to be, the real disruptive companies, I think are going to kind of come 12 to 18 months from now. And like I said before, I think they're going to involve data, and they're going to involve loyalty, and there's some form of e-commerce there. But I think 2013 is still going to be a little bit of a kind of a hangover year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're excited about the prospect of a full local commerce operating system. I think if this panel were to be back in a year, maybe the focus isn't at all on daily deals. It's on all these great tools and pieces of value that different companies, including Groupon, are adding to merchants to connect them to the internet, to connect them to their consumers who are on Twitter and Facebook looking to make decisions about where to go. And certainly we have a few of those assets, but I think we're going to see a ton of great activity around the local commerce operating system over the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, final word, Sarah.
I would, first of all, agree with both of these guys on the points that they just made. And I guess the other thing I would just close with is that the whole reason we're so focused on the relationship with the vendor and the relationship with the consumer is that the product is going to evolve like crazy. And, you know, you guys all know how fast the consumer web has evolved. And, you know, we talk about mobile offerings. Everything is mobile now. That tightness of that connection with our two sets of customers will allow us to continue to iterate on the product. Because you can't just start from scratch every time, and we spend most of our time on those two relationships.
Okay, now has come the time for a rousing round of applause for these excellent panelists.